Hello, everybody, and welcome to the IC Topic Chats for April 13th, 2023. 18 years ago today, I defended my dissertation and became a doctor, which is crazy. And nobody ever, in fact, I take that back. One person in my entire 18 years has ever said, hey, congratulations, happy anniversary. My family ignores it. It's hilarious. Anyway, so it's just one of those funny things. But today's IC Topic Chats is a panel session. We're joined by a number of people. We've got Tasha Parker, she's the chair-elect for the IC-TIG, the Topical Interest Group, Independent Consulting IC-TIG. Susan Wolf, Ann Price, and Kurt Stuke, who are those three are kind of my partners in crime for these IC Topic Chats each week. They come, and when I don't know what to say, I just start asking them questions, and I put them on panels, and they oblige and they humor me. So I'm happy to do that. I'm going to take this this little cover page off here, and I'm going to let everybody see each other and talk. But I'm going to start by just asking Susan and Kurt and Ann and Tasha to introduce yourself and say a little bit about who you are, and then we'll get into some of these questions. Go ahead, Susan.
Oh, okay. Susan Wolf. I have a consulting company, Susan Wolf and Associates. We're in Grand Prairie, Texas, which is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We're kind of between the two. And I do a lot of work with health equity and, evaluation in addition to strategic planning, coalition development, and anything else that I'm capable of doing that looks like fun.
Go ahead, Ann.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going in order. So
I'm sorry, you're in my order. You're the next person to the right on my screen. So I should have probably started with Tasha because I introduced her first, but you're the next person on my screen. So.
No worries. Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Price. I'm president of Community Evaluation Solutions. I've been in business since 2004, so a skinny minute. I work with coalitions and community-based organizations like nonprofits who are doing the hard work of systems level change. Susan is my work wife and my book partner. So yeah, we birthed that baby. Yeah, so happy to be here.
Tell us, put a little something in the chat about your book if you want to give a little promo for that. I know that this is a big piece of what you're trying to do these days. Just make sure people are aware of the work that you've done.
Cool. Yeah, I could probably scramble and do that, or Susan will probably beat me to the punch.
Susan is the marketing queen, I think. I'm going to pass it on to pass the mic over to
Ann. That's Ann. I am so
Ann.
Not marketing.
No marketing.
No, I am begging my granddaughter to hurry up and finish college because that's her major and give me free services.
Tasha, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself while Ann and Susan get together their marketing piece to put in the chat.
I'm Tasha Parker. I own Institute of Development. I'm based out of Wichita, Kansas. I am a community psychologist, so social worker. I started Institute of Development, I think December of 21. I spent most of my professional careers doing therapy, so transitioning over to doing more research and evaluation. And so I just love it. I'll try just about anything. Of course, I have some expertise in some things, but I'll do just about anything, at least once. Kurt?
Okay, I'm Kurt Stuke in San Antonio, Texas. And yes, I have a new flower as my background. There's more about that coming later. It actually will tie in to this. I have a small business. There's 5 of us now. And we work primarily in the education sector, although we do a few things that are different. I now have 3 contracts that are looking at the relationship between graduate students and their PIs, and graduate students to graduate students, because in one case, there's a report of a lack of civility between grad students. Typically, we're working with undergrads, K-12, but this is a new one for us. So we're getting to look at what's going on in graduate school and research institutions. That's it for me.
So Tasha, have you ever skydived? You said you'll try anything once.
That's a little much.
Okay, not anything.
Well,
There's a limit. There's a line you don't cross, huh?
I would on the right day, the right person asking me, it could be possible. It could be possible. But I was
see.
going to tell Kurt that I did my dissertation over faculty incivility in graduate school and the impact on graduate students. So we should talk sometime.
We should talk.
I see a collaboration happening in front of our eyes. So today's conversation is about red flags. And so, you know, I probably didn't spend enough time thinking about the conversation items, but it was just something to get started. And I sent those out to the panel in advance. And I guess I'll just throw it out to the group, and anybody can jump in with what they're thinking. But what are some of your client red flags? And perhaps if you want to get to the point of saying some of those, what you do about them. But so anybody who wants to jump in, or if nobody jumps in, I'll just start calling names.
I can start with something. A couple of years ago, I had a client that asked me to prepare an infographic with information that had absolutely no evidence behind it. It's just what she wanted it to be. That was a big red flag to me. And of course, I didn't do it. I flat out told her I just can't find evidence to support this. And kind of ghosted me after that. I got my money out of him, so I was okay with that.
So I guess this is an interesting conversation. So what does red flag mean to you? Does it mean that this is somebody who's asking you to do something unethical, which is what you're describing there, Susan? Or is this something that's an indicator of trouble to come, or all of the above? So maybe just operationalize the conversation of what is a red flag?
To me, it's something that bodes not so good for either the relationship. Maybe this person is not somebody I'm going to be able to connect with, right? Or it could mean that, you know, like this is somebody that's going to want me to do unethical things, or it's just something that tells me that this is not something I want to work on or somebody I want to work with.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think all of it, for me, it's like the spicy armpit. Like you're in a situation, your pits get a little sweaty. It's like, oh, I don't know about this. You may not know exactly if they're gonna want me to do unethical things. And I may not know if it's unethical, or it could just be like, I don't know if we're gonna get along, but it's just that immediate, like, ooh, spiciness. And it's like, oh, I don't know about this. I think anything that induces that feeling is a red flag.
Spicy armpits. Can I quote you on that, Tasha? Okay, spicy armpits.
That is a new one on me, but yeah, that really resonates with me, Tasha. Your definition there. To me, it's, you know, it's an immediate feeling that something's not right or not going to be right. Exactly what you said. Either we're not going to connect in some way, or there might be a value issue, or we're just not going to, I don't know, speak the same language in private conversations with certain people on this call that I will not call out. You can identify yourself. To me, just to be virtual, you know, just very transparent. It comes from probably a very traumatic childhood upbringing. So we call it spidey senses, right? So our spidey senses go off when things just don't feel right.
Now, see, I had that word in my notes, and now you said it. Now Kelly said it. You guys scooped me.
Oh, did Kelly say that too? Oh, look, Kelly said it too. I just saw that. Yeah, exactly.
I want to point out, Naima put a really good definition of red flag into the chat.
Yes.
An indication of something that will make you miserable in the long run.
Yeah.
I really like that one.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure.
Yeah. And you may not know what that is right away. Kurt?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up that part about long term, because there's things our clients do that, you know, piss us off, and that's a yellow flag, but it's temporary kind of thing. And then it's the long term. For me, the operational definition is when I wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm arguing with the ceiling. You know, it's like I'm just looking, I'm in bed, I'm looking up and I'm going, rah, 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 you know, it's like, okay, now this is time to stop working on this project.
Yep.
Literally at 3 a.m. I shouldn't be working on the project, but it just, in the long term, just stop doing that one.
Yeah.
Do you ever, so for those of us who internally track our time, do you ever count that 3 a.m. doing with the ceiling time is in your toggle time tracker? Because sometimes I do. If one of my projects makes me so upset that I'm in the middle of the night thinking about them, I'm not that they get charged anymore because it's just internal, but I'm like, I spent time on that project last night at 3 a.m.
I don't do that, but I'll track if I reach out to somebody to talk about it. I'm like, oh, because we all have a bandwidth, like an emotional bandwidth. But I think it's the same thing, like my emotional capacity for work, and I have to honor that. And so when I look at that time, like if I talk to Susan and Ann and a million other people about the same thing, it's like that's a problem. If I spend 5-10 hours of my time.
Yeah, it feels like we're moving into the way we handle this question, right? So if I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about a project or a client, usually a person, or I can't stop complaining about said person, said project, then that's a big indication to me that it's time to walk away, or hopefully you haven't even signed the contract yet.
Yeah, before the contract too, a red flag for me is someone whose values aren't consistent with mine. If there's something that shows that, they just aren't sharing my values, I really prefer not to work with them as well. Just because I want to really feel good about what I do.
So I did ask you guys about what actions you can take. MJ in the chat has asked one of the questions that is obvious. Do we walk away from these things? Clearly, Susan, if you haven't signed a contract with them, you haven't engaged in work, you can easily walk away because you haven't lost any time or money or effort yet. But I have red flags that I'm in the middle of, and I ran through, I saw it, I knew it was going to be a problem, and I said, this is going to be, I'm just going to have to factor this into this is kind of like the BS of having to deal with some of this into this, because the contract is consistent with who we are. It's serving the kind of people we want to serve. I'm just dealing with a really kind of a big pain in the butt in the way of one of our client managers. And so that's going to continue to be a problem. But if I can get past that, then I can do the kind of work I want to do with the kind of people I want to do. That's going to get me to the next level of the kind of work I want to do. So to what degree do you ignore the red flag and say it is what it is?
Okay, I'm going to bring in my analogy. The flower is a thistle. And if you look over on the one side, there's a little prickly parts, and every now and then you get pricked by a thistle. It hurts a little bit, but you go on. There's a bee in here. And so the bee, some people react to a bee sting a lot more. And so if that's bothersome, you still might live through it. It's when you get so bad that you have to throw in the white flag. Okay, so the white flower, white flag. I have raised it once, Mary Patterson. It's one where, yes, I have actually walked away from a contract because it was bad enough. My first action is think about, is this fixable? In one case, it was they weren't respecting my hours. And I just wrote to them, I've put in 150% of the hours so far this year that I had billed for, that we had estimated. And so I said, I need to cut back on the activities we're doing. And they respected that. But it was one where I had evidence, it was fairly concrete, fairly straightforward. But there's another one where it was an ethics integrity violation. And that's the one I walked away from. So what your action is, your reaction to it is just depending on whether it's a thistle prick or it's time to wave the white flag.
I think Ann and I walked into a situation and there were subtle, it was my project, Ann was working with me on it, and there were subtle things that we should have paid attention to probably early on. The first being that we were never allowed to just go to the communities. This was a multi-community coalition evaluation. We've talked about it before. But when we were never allowed to just go to the communities without like every time we went, it had to be the coordinator and the foundation people. And then as we were trying to do our interviews and things, they were interfering or asking to be in on them. And we're like, no, we can't. Finally we had to let one of them sit in on an interview or two. And those were red flags to us that even though we were the evaluation team, we had absolutely no autonomy. And that should have been, it was like, I should have right then seen that things weren't right on this project. And ultimately it came down to, in one community, there was a professor that kept calling himself their evaluator. And we kept saying, no, we're the evaluators, you're not. But then the foundation was very supportive of him. So there were just a lot of things like relationships, things being done in the communities that we didn't agree with. And when we pointed them out, we were asked to take them out of the report. Just a lot of things like that red flag after red flag. And finally, when it got down to us being told to take something out of the report and us being scolded and told we couldn't go to a certain town because the professor didn't want us there. And it was like, yeah, because we called him out because he's doing research on that community. And it was like, we're done. We did not want to support a project that would allow somebody to go in and do research on an impoverished community under the pretense of helping them.
Yeah, in that case that Susan is talking about, I think it might have been that first meeting that we all had with everyone. So after the project had started, I remember they put a picture of the organizational chart in front of us. And I remember looking at that going, oh, fudge. Well, that's not the word that I said to myself, but it starts with that letter, because it was really clear to me where we were on the food chain. Like the coordinator, the project coordinator, we were under the project coordinator, who was under project officers, who were under the president of the foundation. So it could be the organizational structure. Naima asked about some of the subtle red flags that that we've intuited, if I'm saying that word right. And gosh, I really don't have anything other than specific, other than to say it's a spidey sense that something is going wrong. So to dig a little deeper in the way I handle that, it's that initial client meeting. It's trying to suss out how they really define success. What are their goals? Who I'm going to be working with, what are their values, my approach, so I talk a lot about my approach and how I like to work with clients and what works really well. So that pre-meeting is really important. Contracting language about how we're going to communicate, how we're going to work together, what's going to happen if it doesn't work out and we walk away. So language about that. And then I also do monthly calls with all my clients, even the little clients, get them some kind of, monthly touch and check-in so that we can talk about, the red flags, and we can talk about other red flags. But so those are some of the ways that I try to handle those kinds of things. I don't know about you guys.
When I think about subtle red flags, Naima, I think the work that we do as evaluators, like we want to be curious, like when we show up, like we're curious, like we want to investigate and find the story, not tell a particular story. And I can remember one of my project I had to walk away from at that initial meeting, they really weren't curious. They wanted a specific story to be told. And I remember hearing that in that meeting. I was like, okay. And I asked a clarifying question and they repeated themselves. But I kind of was like, oh no, that's orange. I like orange, like versus acknowledging it. But as time went on, it continued to kind of escalate and get more and more clearly read. And I think one of the things for me is I know from the beginning, I'm always willing to walk away from anything because my values always come first. Like I pride myself in the human that I am. And last week or so, I was in a meeting and Jerry Peak made a comment of operationalizing your values, right? And so I think that is a way for all of us like, to intentionally do it. Right. And that's how you know when it's time to walk away. But we have to be willing to walk away from the money because sometimes, because one of the projects I had to walk away from, it was a lot of money in a short amount of time. And they knew that. And I don't think they believed that we were going to be willing to make the choice to step away. And it's not that they were doing something egregious. It was just like, that doesn't feel right. And that's not what I stand for.
I think that's what happened when we walked away. They figured they had so much money that it was like a $400,000 project. And I don't think they ever expected that we would actually walk from that. I think they thought they could get us to cave to whatever. And it was like, no. But Tasha makes such a good point about needing to walk away, needing to be willing to do that. It hurt.
It hurt. And not because of the money, it hurt because on paper, it was, Susan and I are both community psychologists. It was everything you could possibly want as a community psychologist.
The project was our dream. It was like, oh my God, our dream project finally. And then it became a nightmare because, you know, what they stated they were about. And that's the other thing is in the beginning, they did state that they were about the same values we held, but they just wouldn't practice them when push came to shove. They didn't do it.
Yep.
There were two themes that just went through that conversation. One is the cumulative nature, things happen over time, and the other is the escalation. So in a shout out to Pink Floyd, what you have to be careful is the momentary lapse of reason. You know, our PIs are stressed out. They may go bonkers for like 2 months where they just treat you like dirt. And once they get over their stress level, then they come back. And so you don't want to, you know, you don't want to walk away from a project too soon. And unless it is a legal issue or, you know, severe integrity ethics issue, then you can walk away early. But you do have to make sure that it's not just the fact that your PI is ghosting you because he or she's really busy. So momentary things versus the cumulative and the escalation.
Yeah, and Kurt, I would add to that, you could probably also walk away too late. So you know, I will say that this happens very rarely, right? If you trust your spidey senses, if you have a good process where you're working with clients, because you know what, we're not meant for everybody. There's lots of evaluators, right? So if you do your due diligence and you work with people who you truly, you know, are going to enjoy, every once in a while one gets by. Like, so I had a coalition and the group hired me before they hired the coordinator, and then they hired the coordinator. The coordinator was sending all sorts of red flags, right? And I stayed with that project probably for 4 years of a 5-year grant with a possibility of another 5 years. But after 4 years of her never approving a logic model, never approving evaluation report, never approving anything, sitting in a meeting with a federal project officer where they asked her directly, do you have a steering committee? And she said, yes. And I'm sitting right there like, yeah, no, you don't. She actually lied to a project officer in a site visit, right? So finally, after I'm doing all the things, Kurt, I'm staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night. I'm ruminating. I'm thinking about her all the time. Because it's Susan knows exactly who I'm talking about. Don't say the name. Don't say the name. Right? Finally, I'm like, you know, I'm done. It's really not. It's not worth the stress. This is not the work I do. This is not collaborative, participatory evaluation on any stretch. There were so many other things. And finally, I said, you know, I'm done. I'm done.
I just want to piggyback on that. You know, you say waiting too late, but I think that's also being ready, being willing to walk away, but be willing to have these tough conversations early, because you can be direct and kind.
Oh, so many times, Tasha.
Right? You can be direct and kind, just this is what I see, this is my concern. But also being able to step in that discomfort of people being upset with you and like building the bandwidth to be able to navigate conflict, because conflict resolution can be, this is the therapist, right? It can be really healthy if you manage it appropriately. It can improve a relationship, but be willing to say, hey, this is happening, I don't like it.
Yep.
There's a saying, they say, speak readily, but never first. And bringing that energy into the work we do when we're with people.
Right. Yeah. And in this case, I definitely did that. Read the book on difficult conversations, had somebody come in office hours, had a conversation about that, tried all of the things. The story I'm telling myself is, and, you know, just to remind you, here is what our agreements were in terms of, you know, reviewing and blah, 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 and all of the things. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Please don't leave me. Right. And me saying, oh, okay. Yeah. She gets it. I've expressed myself. Yeah. And then it didn't change. And then it was time to walk away.
Tasha, Sarah Lang put out a idea that you talk specifically about what you were just talking about in a future IC topic chat. Did you want to define that a little bit better, and I'll follow up with you? Or Sarah, did you want to come on and discuss what you specifically liked about what Tasha had to say?
Thanks.
Sorry,
I was thinking that I'd love to hear more from Tasha, either one-on-one or through a topic chat, about how she goes about those conversations, because I just ran into an issue where I was dropped today by a client, and I saw red flags and I didn't hold my footing well enough, and I tried to support them, but they were basically like fast tracking everything, and I didn't feel comfortable with that, and I didn't speak up enough, and I could have stopped it before they wasted their time that I knew they were wasting. So now I feel this like sort of guilt because I didn't speak up when I should have. So I would love to talk more about how you hold those conversations. That's it.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that at some point. Whether, I don't know, we can talk or we can do a separate chat. But I think in any difficult conversation, it's important to keep out what I think, like in the measurables. This is what's happening. This is what's not happening. This is what I need to happen. This is what I don't need to happen. And then you give me feedback. I mean, I think it's hard because we're all humans having human experiences, right? And that comes with emotions. But being able to acknowledge, like, I can hold these here and I can deal with these, and I trust myself to deal with these. But right now, we need to be able to deal with the observables. But I'm sorry you went through that, and thank you for telling us. But yeah, I'm here to support.
Oh yeah, and it was definitely a lesson learned. I mean, I could have said, oh, well, it's the client's loss, but actually it's something that I need to put into my practice so that I'm more clear about how things will go and how they won't go, and what I see as evaluation versus what they may see as evaluation. I just didn't have enough upfront conversations about it. But yeah, thanks, Tasha. That'd be great.
And Sarah, and you're talking about this, I think I hear the most important thing about red flags and stuff. Instead of Sarah sitting there and saying, well, that was just a bad client. Well, I love hearing that you're processing it to think, what could I be doing differently? What did I learn from this? Just, you know, taking that experience and turning it into a learning opportunity is really, because we have all, I mean, those of us that have been at this for years and years and years, we've all had this stuff happen. And that I think that what makes you successful is, like you're doing now, is thinking through what you could do better in the future to prevent this, instead of just going off and, you know, getting pissy at the client or whatever, you know what I mean? So kudos to you for that, and for sharing it with us. Yeah, self-reflective practice. And that's exactly what this is all about. And that's why some of us have been here for a long time, because we we self-reflect whenever things happen and we continue to grow and learn. So,
I will point out that, thanks for coming on, Sarah. Just a quick promo for her. She'll be presenting on the anti-racist business book on May 25th. If anybody wants to join us for that, it'll be her book review or book chat. And if you want to try and read it ahead of time, I'm sure that would be great if you have the chance and the opportunity to do that. I think this gets in this just naturally transitions into how is our business, how have we changed our consulting practices to accommodate these? I mean, the obvious is if it's bad, you walk away, you stop it, or you have that uncomfortable but direct and kind conversation with your client. So, but what are some things that we can do to avoid getting into the red flag situation to begin with?
Well, I think I already shared mine, having that, that pre-engagement discussion, building things into your contract, having, periodic check-ins. So I want to hear from other folks.
I learned something really good from Ann Price about talking to people about their prior relationships with evaluators experiences. But I learned that from Ann. Two things I thought of are making sure you have a very clear scope of work, because that is a document that can so easily be gone back to, and making sure that people understand your boundaries. If you are done working at 5 o'clock every day and you don't want to do business in the evenings, make clear to your clients up front that I really keep to this schedule. Just letting them know what your boundaries are up front, so that they understand that they can't be calling you at 8 o'clock at night because they just thought of something.
And I'll follow up on that and just make sure when you do read your email and you're dying to respond to it at 9 o'clock at night, you set that email to go at 8 a.m., even if you type it out at 9 p.m. Because,
I love it, man.
Because if you break your own rules, then you're just inviting somebody to continue to expect things from you in the evenings and on the weekends. It's not, sometimes you can't help yourself and you just want to get it off your plate. I get that, but.
I love that. Thanks, Matt. Never
Sorry,
thought of that.
didn't mean to jump in on your idea there, but I will say if you have an expectation that you don't work in the evenings and on the weekends, then don't work on the evenings and the weekends, because you are going to invite people to do that if you break your own rules, or if you do, be sly about it. Okay, sorry. What are some other things that people do? I think, Anne, you make a good point about making sure there's good project description, evaluation plan, contract that's put in there. And I think earlier, was it Jenna who put a suggestion on contract language? Somebody put in contract language. Sorry, yeah, it was Jenna who put in her termination statement from her contract about how to get out of a contract. I think she was responding to MJ Pattison. One thing that I always do, and I from the very first time that I started interacting with a brand new client, we have a consistent way of trying to interact with them. We set up an MOU to begin with, so they know we're professional, and it lays out how we expect to work together on this thing that I'm not even getting paid for, but that sets the groundwork for the future, because now they know we're a professional organization. We like to show up to meetings and they understand who we are and what we're trying to do. And so hypothetically, doesn't always work. It sets the groundwork for a good professional working relationship down the road. Those are my quick reflections. Anybody else want to put some other things that they do to avoid red flag or avoid situations that turn into red flags, which turn into problems?
I think like I can't know what I don't know. Like, but I think having things in place, like, so I have this form that after we initiate contract that I have them complete, just asking them questions about my expectations, like their expectations for me, communication, and all those things. So then I can come back and say, hey, this is not going to work because this is not how I work. I don't work in the evenings. I don't work on the weekend, or I'm not going to respond to you in 10 hours, whatever that may be, but also establishing like a written communication plan. And then I have a shared workspace where everybody can see anything that's happening that's relevant to their role. And I did some work with Mendelin, shout out to Mendelin. And she introduced this MOCA, this project management type tool. And so I use that probably sometimes too much, but as much as possible to help clarify the different roles and who owns what, who manages what. And that has been amazing. And Mendelin
MJ asked you, Tasha, if you want to share that questionnaire that you give to clients.
Sure, I'll dig it up and I'll send it to Matt and then you can send it.
Yeah, we can put that as part of the things that get shared out with our follow-up email.
The one other situation for me is history with the client. So it's not that we've ever had a contract, it's the proposal writing stage. There's one client I am for whatever on writing proposals with them. And it's, proposal writing, if you hit 10%, great, for a hit rate, success rate. But I've had one client that just doesn't write good proposals. It's just, you can tell it's not going to go anywhere. And at some point you just have to say, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to work with you. And so that's very much at the front end, pre-contract or even post-contract and all. It's just at the very beginning, it's like, I'm not going to work with you because of history.
I have some clients like that where in fact, I just had one reach out to me yesterday. I've been working with these folks for 2 or 3 years and they do good work and they have been funded, but I must be the curse to them because they've never gotten funded on anything I've been on. They're wonderful people, but it just doesn't work. Another red flag that I see is when something seems to change within a client atmosphere. We have this going on with one of our clients right now, where it seems like the relationship's grown cold, and I don't think it's about us. I actually don't think it has anything to do with us. I think something's happening internally to that organization. I think there might be some infighting amongst the administration, and I know it's hard to be a nonprofit these days, but I think about it and I go, we need to keep our eye on it. We're not doing anything wrong. We're trying to do our work well, but it's just like this one, the spidey senses went off where it's like, let's pay closer attention to this so that if there's something we can do, not that I know what to do at this point, I don't think there's anything we can do, but when it becomes apparent there's something that we should be doing, let's not delay. And so the spidey senses have just said, pay attention, alert, alert, alert. Not that there's anything for us to do because we're doing all our work, but we can sense there's something going on there.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody. I don't know who that was.
Go ahead.
That's a good point, Matt, because it's not always like in the beginning when you're first meeting somebody. It could be you're on a team, maybe the CEO leaves or the project manager leaves, or maybe you're on an evaluation team and it's not going that great because there's been a leadership change. Gosh, that might have happened to me. Yeah, and so that's a really good point, Matt. Sometimes just things change, and you got to do that self-reflective practice. Is it me? Is it somebody else? Am I doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing? Have I gotten lazy? Is it time for a change? Right? Maybe they need a different perspective, or am I just, not feeling useful or feeling used, whatever it is. You've got to like go into that cave and do that reflection.
Yeah, those 2 points were exactly.
Good question, Catherine.
I love
And
that.
you said exactly what I was going to say, is the bit about the change in personnel. I have to, when I was a federal employee, we had change of personnel, and we always had to groom the new boss into our way of thinking. And when we've had a change of personnel, sometimes it's worked in saying, this is how we work with you. And in one case, it was just like, we wrote out the last year and it wasn't that great of an experience because of the personnel change. We didn't leave, it's just we wrote out the grant for 1 more year.
Yeah, Catherine, I love your comment. And can I just say, Susan and I were on a webinar a couple of weeks ago from I don't want to call out the national organization. I don't want to call them out. You do it if you want to,
We
Susan.
won't call them out.
Right. But it was an evaluator supposedly talking about, oh God, what was, oh no, I can't say the name, 'cause then
Evaluators
you'll
aren't
know.
your enemy or something like
Yeah, I,
that.
I didn't even want to say the name because then it might be known. But anyway, one of the one of the evaluator red flags, because she talked about this, was when your evaluator wants to have something to say about your program design or your, right? Like, and what else did she say? When your evaluator wants to do anything more than crunch numbers and write the data report.
Yeah, she kept talking about the evaluator having to be very distanced and stay away from everything. And it was like, oh my God, this is all so wrong. I mean, she's like, and if they're not distanced enough, there's going to be bias built in, and just, it was, Kay Kelly saw it too. It was appalled.
I may have talked about it on LinkedIn.
But it was disturbing. Yeah, the 80s are calling. It was very disturbing because it's like, well, then how does the evaluator help you with a theory of change for your program? Or how does your evaluator, the thing I spoke to a mini group from that same organization later in the day and talked about how actually things have changed since then. That's an older view that was prevalent in the field. And I explained to him that things have changed because now we maintain our distance and our objectivity, in that if we have been involved with the program, we care enough to want to say the truth about it, because we don't want to support bad programs. And if you view evaluation as an opportunity to improve, then you want to call out the bad stuff, because that's how you help somebody improve. So hopefully it changed maybe their thinking for those that had been there.
I was in a proposal review committee where NIH review team explicitly asked, how has the PI made changes based on your recommendations? They want us to have useful data that the team can use.
NSF does the same in their site visits. They'll ask the external evaluator, how have they adopted or, used any of the recommendations that you've provided? So, yeah. So I do a lot of capacity building with organizations, and I usually ask them that question, what's been your experience with an evaluator? And it is a list of red flags, right? We can't understand what they're saying. Right? They're not speaking a plain language that we can understand. They don't include us. We just get a report at the end. It's those kinds of things. So, they definitely have their own set of red flags. And it's usually coloring, when I come to work with them, that's the color that I'm dealing with, right? It's like, through that lens, they're like, are you going to be that same person that we wasted money on before and don't really understand what we got? And so, and it goes back to that presentation that, Anne and Susan were talking about, that's the evaluator right there. That's the red flag, is that person who just crunches numbers and doesn't really work with the organization. And I think those of us who have been internal evaluators, whether we worked for the feds or some other organization, we come from that perspective of, yes, I need to be here and be objective and speak truth to power, but I also need to be embedded here and understand how things work and be able to get along and have those relationships and be able to work with these people so that I can influence them in improving their programs, right? So, I mean, that's usually how I approach it. And I work for an inspector general's office too, as an evaluator. And so, when you say you're an inspector general coming, I mean, yeah, now they're really like, but that was never, my goal was always to leave with them going, we love you, and just kind of change their mind and make them realize that not all of us just are one giant red flag.
Yeah, that was my experience with the Inspector General's office, is that they actually began to like let us know, well, we'd like it if you'd ask these questions too, if you're going to be doing an inspection of us. So it got to the point where the agencies learned that they could get answers from our evaluation team for things they wanted to know in the middle of our doing inspections on their programs.
So I want to give
So-
everybody a chance to pipe in and ask questions and make this a more open dialogue for the last couple minutes. Any last thoughts before I stop the recording? Anne, Tasha, Kurt, Susan?
I have one. When I had the integrity ethics issue that I ended up walking away from, the one thing I did that worked was I talked to my peers. We had a meeting of 8 or 9 people in San Antonio that are all evaluators. We really didn't have an agenda for that meeting, for that get together. And I said, I'm going to talk about my problem. And I laid out all of the information and then say, do I walk away or not? And unanimous, they said, walk away. But it was nice having that sounding board that someone else to listen to. So I wasn't just talking to my ceiling at 3 a.m. I was talking with peers and hearing about, hearing their input, hearing their perspective on it. So talk with your peers if you get into those ugly situations.
Right. I would say talk to your peers. Yes. Do what we talked about earlier. Have that difficult conversation. You don't want to make it a habit that every time you have a red flag, you walk away. That should not be the takeaway message here. You want to do all the things you can to avoid that in the first place. Set you both up for success, because at the end of the day, we want what's best, for them, and only walk away if you've done all of those things. You've done the self-reflective practice, you've gotten advice, you've tried to talk to your client, you've done all of the things. That should not be your standard practice to walk away.
Yeah, Matt gave us a sort of a guideline of things to think about. Thank you, Matt, so we could prepare. And he did ask us what advice we have for others. That was where I had listened to your spidey sense before everybody scooped me. But I think 2 other things are, you don't want to ever compromise your values. If you find yourself doing that, then you've got to give it some serious thought. But also remember your value. You bring value. And keep that in mind as you're negotiating and navigating these kind of things as well.
Wrap us
Okay.
up, Tasha.
Go ahead, Tasha.
I don't need to repeat anything. Ditto +1 to everybody.
4 stars, 5 stars. Don't go away, anybody. I'm just going to stop the recording.